Hi, welcome to ArtC. I'm your host, Bill Horin. Today we will feature ArtC's 25-minute 2018 documentary, Shattered, Portrait of a Glass Factory. Enjoy.
There was something in the woods and plains of South Jersey that seemed to build towns, some natural matrix of civilization. It brought together people. It opened shops and streets, sent the roar of factories echoing through the woods. By the dawn of national life, it had transformed the loneliness of coastal forest into a throb of industry. It did this by its very nature, by being where it was in the confluence of earth, water, and human aspiration. That something was sand. Those people came to make glass. In 1806, Irish immigrant James Lee built New Jersey's third glass factory at a site on the Morris River known for its lumber mills. Thus the name, Millville. It thrived. After all, a growing nation needed glass, and when 82 years later, Millville pharmacist and physician Theodore C. Wheaton learned the $3,000 he had loaned the owners of a small bottle factory was in jeopardy, he had to make a decision. Dr. Wheaton, endowed with enthusiasm, ability, and what we now call vision, decided to take control. He joined the factory's management, retired from the practice of medicine and pharmacology, and dedicated his life to glass. By 1890, he was the sole owner of the T.C. Wheaton Company. After establishing sales offices in Colorado and New York, TC went about expanding the business, buying nearly 400 acres of adjacent Millville land to do so, more furnaces, factory space, and workers, doubling and tripling production capacity. TC plowed all profits into the company's expansion while taking a salary of only $30 per week. He was a master of thrift and expected the same of his employees. It paid off, and the company grew. Larger facilities, greater production. In 1931, when T.C. died, his three children, T.C. Jr., Frank, and Ada, assumed control. Frank became president.
The day I came home from the Navy, I came home very early in the morning, got off the bus, walked home, and of course, my father and grandfather did upholstery work for the Wheaton family. So we called Mr. Wheaton at his home, and he said, come on in, we'll have a job for you. So I went to work that morning, got my very first job at Wheaton as a floor sweeper in the cell room, corrugation room, where they made the boxes to put the bottles in, and they made the cells. And that's where my Wheaton career began.
When I was growing up, I said, I will never, ever, ever work in a glass house. I said I will starve to death before I go in a glass house. And after I got older, I worked in two of them.
I was a secretarial admin, and looking back, and after I was laid off and all the men were complaining, I was a damn good secretary. I kept cross-reference information and could find things at a snap that they couldn't find. And I would try to teach them my cross-reference. Well, that's okay, you know how to do it. That was even before computers.
As a packer, I worked in plant too. Well, we had to check for defects, splits, check unders, check over, heel taps, blank tears. You could go on and on.
You had to shovel all the glass out of these big tanks onto a wheelbarrow and then take it out back and dump it over the rail. It was hot, it was noisy, it was muggy down there. There was always moisture in there. It was just constant humidity.
A year after his grandfather's death, 19-year-old Frank Wheaton Jr. joined the company at the bottom, pushing a wheelbarrow. Soon he was headed for the top.
Mr. Wheaton Jr., who was the president of the company for over 50 years, we referred to him as the spark plug. He had an imagination. He could see that dollar bill underneath that rock at 500 paces. He knew how to find it. Our plastic coat division he was fiddling with melting plastic in his little lab in his house up at the lake, and he started melting plastic and pouring it over a bottle. That was the kind of creative, scientific activities that took place in his mind.
Frank Wheaton Jr. was Jekyll and Hyde. He was the nicest, most pleasant man when things were going well, but he had no problem coming in and reaming you out in the middle of the office for something that he didn't think went well. But then he'd say, take care of it, and he'd walk away.
From the mold shop, he walked in one day and said, I want you to come to my office. He took me in his office and sat down, and he says, I want to start a black box division. And I'm sitting there saying to myself, okay, what is a black box division? To myself, because I knew it would come to me. You always learn to not question any of the Wheatons because they knew what they were doing. And I'm saying, well, whatever you want, sir. I mean, I'm happy. You want me to start a division? That's like the most powerful thing you could ever think of doing at Wheaton Industries is to be one of the 17 division managers. So he kept explaining. Finally, he opened up an Arthur H. Thomas catalog. And he opened it up, and back then, all the instruments in laboratories were black. So now I understood a black box division. He wanted to start making laboratory instruments.
Through the economic depression of the 1930s, while other American businesses contracted, the T.C. Wheaton Company managed to expand. New buildings, more factory space, greater emphasis on research and design. In 1938 came the company's most dramatic innovation, the changeover from hand-blown glass to automatic manufacture. Here in Millville was the triumph of the machine age. From that point, the company grew to become a world leader in the production of cosmetic and pharmaceutical containers.
Our job as division leaders was to encourage people to work hard and encourage people to be part of a team. And that's what all the Wheatons instilled in us, to be good leaders. Managers? No, good leaders.
During World War II, the company produced vast amounts of glassware, especially medical supplies for the military. After the war, when the need for these supplies diminished, the company found itself with many empty buildings. It was decided that the third generation of Wheatons would form their own company, provided that it didn't compete with the T.C. Wheaton Company. In 1946, Frank Jr. and 9 relatives formed the Wheaton Glass Company.
He was the spark plug. He was the man that he couldn't sit still. He had to be starting something new. As soon as we got the plastic coat division going, let's get the scientific division going. Let's get in the candle business, the plastic bottle business, going to Europe, buying patents to make plastic bottles, creating all these special manufacturing divisions that came out of it. Wheaton Worldwide, Wheaton New Line, Wheaton Scientific. They could just go on. There were 17 divisions.
Throughout the 1950s and 60s, both the T.C. Wheaton and Wheaton Glass companies prospered, emphasizing expansion and diversification, and soon were producing glass not only for America, but for the world. Apart from its Millville facilities, the companies held interest in glass factories throughout the United States and overseas. As its glass industry grew, Millville flourished. The fortunes of factory and civic life were intertwined, benefiting all.
Everybody had a story. Everybody was part of it. This was a factory town, and all the glass companies, not just Wheaton, all these companies formed this glass-making community known in South Jersey where they said, by night and by day, the fires burn.
In 1966, the two companies merged, taking on the name of the company Frank Jr. had been heading for the past 20 years, the Wheaton Glass Company, but later becoming the well-known Wheaton Industries. His father, Frank Sr., became chairman of the board of directors, a position he held until his death in 1983, at the age of 102.
This picture sits on my desk in my office, and it has ever since the late 70s when I took that photo of Mr. Wheaton Sr. I loved him. I loved him like a father. He was quite the leader. Someone would ask the question, whether it was a reporter, whatever, TV, well, Mr. Wheaton, to what do you owe your longevity? And he was waiting for that question. That old stogie would come out of his mouth, and he'd be shaking it a little bit, and the ashes would be falling off, and he'd walk around to the front of his desk, and he'd pick up that little box, and he'd open it up. And engraved in the wood by the guys in the model shop, Jack Choco and those guys, they all made it for him back then, Les Rush. And you opened it up, and it was a four-letter word, and it began with a W and it ended with a K. It was work. One day, Mr. Wheaton came into the engineering department when I was still in the mold shop, and this is Frank Wheaton Jr., me, Thorpe, and myself, and we jumped in the Cadillac and we drove out beyond 10th Street down a wooded road, which is now Glasstown Road, and parked the Cadillac, and I had no idea the mission we were on. Got out, and there was a canvas paper bag in the back with surveyor stakes in it and a hammer, and we started walking through the woods. Frank was talking about, I think we ought to put the museum here, and this is where I think I want to have the glass shop and the reproduction of the original factory. Those are all the things he was talking about. But as we went, he would say, Meade, put one there. And Meade would say, Donald, put one there. And I would get out a wooden oak stake and whack it in the ground with a hammer. We would mark the corners for where Mr. Wheaton envisioned Wheaton Village. And his first vision was the museum.
Frank Wheaton's initial idea for the village was to basically be a glass town circa 1888, or in other words, old Millville. And it wasn't until the village had been established for a while that we really evolved it into as much of an arts organization in addition to a history organization, which grew out of the glass and the artistic interpretation of glass and so on.
By 1976, Wheaton Village was fully established. It was a testament to the Wheaton family's dedication and success, and their commitment to the town where it all began. Yet, despite the company's vast expansion and the success of the village, Wheaton Industries found itself beset with unexpected problems. Among them were a local shortage of natural gas and workers, which forced the company to move some of its operations to Flat River, Missouri. Then, in 1977, an era ended. Responding to a decrease in demand, the company stopped producing hand-blown glass. From now on, for public and posterity's sake, it would only be produced in Wheaton Village. More change was to come.
The glass industry in Millville, both molded glass and tubular glass, started seeing challenges from foreign competition. That was the beginning of the end as far as I was concerned. Could never understand how foreign entities could manufacture and ship across the ocean for cheaper than what you could make it in your own backyard.
At one time, I would say Wheaton's employed over 5,000 people. When I left there in 2001, it was down to 100, like 300, 400, 500 in the whole factory, hot end, back of the house, everything.
Following the near collapse of its glass industry, Millville sought a regeneration. Much art had been incorporated in the city's glass creations, and Millville chose to promote that tradition as a component of its municipal dreams. Therefore, it seemed natural that an arts district could be created where the city's heritage would continue, on canvas, sculpted in stone, captured in photographs, presented in all of art's variety. A hopeful city offered itself to the future in its Glasstown Arts District.
Basically, it was just Wheaton Village and Pat Witt and the Barn Studio of Art. There really wasn't much going on in the arts in the balance of the community at that time.
I decided to move to Millville because there was an art district that was pretty new, and I wanted to kind of be where it was happening. I came in 2002, so I think the art district was only a year old when I decided to come to Millville. I was a pioneer artist in Millville, and it had some things that were available that weren't available where I was living, so it made a nice home base to work from. At the time, I chose 11 artists, as some were friends or good art acquaintances that I thought was the foundation to start a gallery.
Millville's Glasstown Arts District began its growth in 2001 with the opening of its cultural hub, the Riverfront Renaissance Center for the Arts. After years of vacancy, the 700-seat Lavoie Theater was renovated, reopening in 2012. Then, in 2017, Cumberland County College's Arts and Innovation Center was completed, now the home of Clay College.
The Arts District in Millville has really brought something special to the area, I believe. I certainly wouldn't be known to as many people as I am now without being part of the Renaissance here and the other facilities.
Mr. Wheaton, whose dream was Wheaton Village, really was very supportive. The glass company not only gave us funding for a lot of the things that we did, but we also were able to take visitors over there. If we had a paperweight weekend, we all took a tour of the plant and shared information. And as the Creative Glass Center of America grew, which was the fellowship program at Wheaton Arts for contemporary glass artists, as this contemporary movement was growing, a lot of the contemporary artists that came here were able to go into the plant, learn about different things that they were doing in the factory. One artist by the name of David Hopper actually looked at the silk screening paints that Wheaton was using and started to use them internally inside of pieces, and it became a source of that paint. So the glass industry really affected also the glass artists besides our exhibitions and other things.
There was a local attorney named Marvin Wadliger. And I remember Marvin said to me, I never thought Wheaton Village would be more important to Millville than Wheaton Industries is, but I see that day coming. So I guess as far back as the 90s, the handwriting was on the wall in some people's mind that the glass industry wasn't going to be here forever.
All that is will someday be was. Everything crumbles, everything fades away. It's here, then gone, often leaving no record. Seldom does anyone care. They're looking for the new. But some look toward the old. They see beauty in decay, think the decline is as attractive as the incline. They see in deterioration the natural consequence of time. They know nothing escapes, and they wish to present this inherent truth. Such are Tom Holding and Dave Woeller.
The Wheaton Glass factory sitting there was always a goal of mine to get into it. I had seen it in its heyday, but it was always a goal to gain access to that.
We had both been trying to get inside the main plant to document the decay and to preserve a bit of the history. There were many obstacles as to ownership, liability, and that type of thing. But we finally got permission from the City Commission to go inside. We spent 3.5 days inside that plant.
It's a situation where you really don't know what you have until you go in and check it out. My recollection is that upon entering the first large building, it became evident that it was a multi-day shoot. Obviously, based on the number of buildings and the vastness, became a multi-day shoot.
My first impression was this place is creepy. We shot in November. It was raining, it was cloudy, it was windy, panels were banging, it was dripping. It was just a surreal experience. We spent 3.5 days basically in the same weather conditions, and I think it really did add to the whole mood of the whole project. What we tried to capture is really a combination between fine art and documentation. I liked the way the light fell on a lot of the old pipes and walls and ceilings and windows and the reflections of the water on the floor. We tried to document, but at the same time being artists, we did lean a little bit to that artistic side of the capture.
A factory is built brick by brick, window by door. The floors are poured, the machinery installed. Men and women enter and their work lives begin. Some remain for decades and never think of the building as having a life, but it does. Eventually the workers leave one by one and then all. The building begins to die. Each day it dies a little more, altering the design until in its demise it may possess a dignity it never held in life. An unforeseen beauty that when captured through the lens of a camera, then transported through the lens of an eye, can be not merely observed, but appreciated.
Those of us that are lucky enough to still be here and lucky enough to know some of the history of this town, that we're part of planning for the future, because we really can't create the future if we don't know the history, if we don't know about the rivers, and we don't know about these glass companies, and we don't know about K&G Men's Shop and Frank's store and Al Keola at the drugstore. So let the history guide the future is what I've always said.
The feeling of a balance between history and contemporary art, I think, has shifted a little bit.
I've seen changes in Millville in 16 years of things come, go. I saw the void go from mold to renovation to crash to rebuilt. I've seen the Art and Innovation Center tear down an empty lot and put up a great building. It's a city that's evolving, and I've seen a bunch of it.
Glassmaking came to South Jersey cities like Millville because of the pine forest cut with rivers through its sandy soil. The forest provided fuel, melting the sand into glass, which was transported on the rivers throughout America and to the world. The basis of that industry is unchanged. The sand remains, and the forests and rivers. The people remain in Millville, looking toward their past to see what awaits, to build from the present toward their future. Millville's glass factories sit mostly quiet now, the men and women who worked in them retaining memories perhaps recalled as through the wavering glass of an old window. Sometimes it must seem that the window has shattered, but even broken glass can be remelted, renewed, recast into new shapes, colors, new life. And just as the shattered insides of the Wheaton Industries plant made possible the photographic art of Dave Woeller and Tom Holding, the shattered views of the past can give form to what lies ahead. Whatever it may be, it will be cast from the sand of imagination, heated with the fuel of human resolve, and transported on the rivers of the mind.